So just letting you know the recording started, and I better share my screen. Okay, so hopefully now you can all see this this great image Tiffany sent us of the well, I was going to say the kitchen bench, but these are the cabinets that would go under the kitchen bench, I'm assuming. And so they have been made by extrusions, and by doing that, you've actually shown that you would be able to make the bench using essentially the same approach. Except that it looks like they may be, they're walls. Okay, I've just realized, yeah, from the options you've got there at the top, they're walls, and that's, okay. So I'm going to show you a different approach to make even this part, and it'll make it easier. And then, again, the kitchen benches. So, yeah, so I understand if you've looked on YouTube for solutions that you might not have found very much, because the people who post things, lots of things on YouTube, often aren't, to be honest, they're not that good. And so they maybe would have a confusing, so I'm just having a look at the chat there. So they would have a confusing, probably complicated solution for that. The people who know probably would think it's very simple, and but a lot of those wouldn't bother posting about that on YouTube. So it can be a tricky one when you're looking at things like that, because it's kind of in between the most basic and then the more advanced things. So what I'm going to do is just make a new, oh no, so I won't make a new project. I'll just open up one that we have, and get our Myrtle Street building. And what am I doing there? ISCOM 3. Here it is. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so I'm going to go firstly just to set up a 3D view. So I've got here a section box that's going around the stairs. I'm just going to bring that out so that I can see more of the building, because I'm going to better show you this in 3D as we make it in plan as well. And there we are. Okay, so we can see there this, I suppose, first floor apartment. And so maybe I'll put it in, maybe I'll do it on the other side, so it's a bit more room. Yeah, okay, so there's some more empty space there. Okay, so I'll just stick it in over here. So I'm going to go to the level 1 floor plan. Right, so what I would recommend to make both the kitchen benches and the cabinets, you should use model in place for all of it. So again, just checking the chats there. Nothing on circular kitchens, no. Okay, so even the things you find on regular kitchens, what I'm, I suppose, trying to warn you about is that they will tell you to use the kitchen bench families, and they are probably overkill. They're going to make it a bit more complicated than it needs to be, and also you won't find kitchen bench families that are curved usually, or if you do find them curved, they won't have the radius that you want. And it's the same for the benches, so for the cabinets under your bench. Again, you won't find very many curved cabinets, but they're quite easy to make. So again, I'm going to make it all using model in place. So again, all I've done so far is go to the level 1 floor plan, and then now I'm going to go to component and then model in place. And we'll set the category to casework. And since I'm going to include all of the kitchen here, I'm just going to call it kitchen cabinets. Again, just keeping an eye on the chat there. Yep, okay, so I'm going to begin modeling using an extrusion. So just using the extrusion tool. Okay, and then I might just refer back to that image. Right, so I'm assuming these would be the shape of the cabinets. Now, they're touching the ground by the look of it, and that's actually okay for the level of presentation you're doing. You don't need to have all the detail. But I'm going to add a kickboard just to keep it consistent with the, I suppose, the industry conventions, which would be to have a kickboard as well as the cabinets and then the bench on top. So I'm going to start again with a kickboard. And to do that, in fact, to do all of this, I'm going to actually just cancel this and just give you one little tip there. If you have a lot of things that are based on a certain shape, it's often helpful to draw that shape first. And so obviously in this case, that shape is, or the shape of those cabinets is determined by a circle. Okay, so you've got two options. You can either draw model lines, which are on the architecture tab, and they'll come up in all of your views. But the other option is to draw detail lines. So they're on the annotate tab, and there you've got detail lines. And the advantage of detail lines is that they only come up in the view that you've drawn them in. So I'm going to use detail lines. So again, under annotate, detail line, and then you can see there you've got the option to draw a circle. So I'm just going to draw one and try and work out the radius that we need. Actually, Tiffany, if you can hear, did you have an inner radius that you'd been working with for that layout?
I didn't know. I was just measuring it by cheek and seeing if it was, because my last kitchen was too big, so this was just a little bit smaller than that. Okay. And it seemed to fit in everywhere.
Okay, all right, no problem. Okay, so then, so by eye, it looks to me like the gap between those two cabinets might be about 700. Looks fairly narrow, so let's say it's either 700, maybe 800 at most. And so then the diameter of that inner circle would then, it looks to me like it'd be about triple that. So let's say it's triple 700, so maybe 21 or around 2 meters across, which would mean it's a 1 meter radius. So I'll make it that. And then I'll draw a second circle, which is going to be for the outside of the bench. So here again, we'll make that 1600, so that we've got a 600 wide kitchen bench. Right, but if it was for a counter for people to eat on, as well as being a work surface, then you might make it a wider bench than that. You could make it up to about 800. But again, if it's just a standard bench depth, again, that's 600. Okay, so having those set out lines is going to help a lot then to do all of the modelling. And so now I'll go back and do what I started before, back to model in place. And again, set the category to casework. And again, call it kitchen cabinets. Okay, and then again, I'll start with an extrusion. And so this is going to be the, again, the kickboard. So I'm going to use pick lines here, which is in the draw panel there, the very last button there with the arrow over the green line. And then I'm going to set an offset value. So this is the amount that the kickboard is going to be set back from the cabinet doors. So let's say it's quite small. It's going to be quite a tight little kitchen, so we'll make it just 50 mil. So now I can pick that inner circle, making sure that my new line goes to the outside and not to the inside. Okay, and so then I'll draw just a straight line now from the center. Right, and so just hovering over one of those circles, then when we come to the middle, it should bring up the center. And then I'll go from the center at the angle we want that cabinet side to be, and this is all dependent on, I suppose, what you want for your design. So I'm not going to be too fussy here about what that actual measurement is. You can see there it's what, 111. Just zoom in a bit to make it maybe go to 110, so it's at least a round number. Okay, and so then I want the same thing at the bottom. Oh, now there, that's a bit weird. It didn't get the center. So I'll just do that again. Okay, just got to be careful there. It's worth just checking those things. I don't know why we're getting different center points. Anyhow, I'll just do that again. Okay, so let's just get that angle again to be 110. I'm probably being too fussy here. It doesn't really matter what the angle is. But I do want to see what's happening there with that center point. Just make sure it's coming up. Yeah, okay, that's fine there. Okay, so then I want this line to be, it looks like the design's very symmetrical. Just looking at the picture there. So I want this line to be the same or flipped down to the bottom. So I've selected the line and then I'll go to Mirror Draw Axis. And then I'm going to pick on the end of that line at the bottom, then come across to the left so I get a straight horizontal line. If I click, then it's going to mirror directly below. And so now I need to join this circle to those two lines. And before I can do that, I'll need to break the circle using split. So up here in the modify panel, we've got the split element tool, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And I'm just going to pick the circle somewhere, at one point, outside of where the final shape would be, if that makes sense, over here on the right, in other words. And now I'll try using trim to join the circle or the curve, now it is, to my line, and then do the same at the bottom. And then I'll offset, so now using offset, and I'll simply make my offset there maybe 450. Depends how much overhang you want on the other side, but that'll give us 100 mil between the back of the cabinet and the kitchen bench, which might be good. You could reduce that, but you still, I think you would want some sort of overhang there. If you wanted it to be the same as on the inside, of course, you could make that 1550 mil, so it's 50 mil from the edge of the bench on both sides. But again, that's a design decision, depends on how the bench is going to operate. And so, but maybe I think I'll leave it there so it's the same as it is on the inside. And then back to trim now, trim to corner. I can join the line to the outer arc or outer curve, and then repeat that now to join the line the right way to the inner curve. So again, just trim to extend the line out, and then trimming again to cut it back. Okay, so that's my kickboard. And oh, now sorry, I was doing the kickboard on the other side as well, and I forgot. So that's got to come back a bit because we want a gap between the cabinet and the bench. On the inside, I'm assuming the doors are going to be flush with the bench. So here I'll make the radius 1500 again. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I'll then set the extrusion end to 100. Okay, so a very simple extrusion, but it's worth just taking the time to set it out properly, and then everything else after that is going to be much easier. So going back to my 3D view now, you can see there it is simply a 100 mil high extrusion coming up from the floor. Okay, so now I'll do the first cabinet. So back to create, back to extrusion, and then I'll use pick lines again. And I can simply choose the two straight sides of my kickboard. Right, that will be where the edge of the cabinet goes as well. I can also pick the inner curve, because that's where the front of the cabinet doors is going to be. And then I'm going to set that offset distance there to 50 and pick the outer edge of the kickboard. Okay, so now before I can trim that circle to the lines, I've got to break it again. So using split element, I just need to break it at one point over here, back to trim, and then I can join all these lines together. Now watch out, you can see there, because of where I picked my curve, it's trimmed to the wrong side, so I'll just undo that. And, oops, and do it again. Just picking the lines a bit closer together. Okay, so there we are. So again, just checking the chat. Yeah, good. Okay. So, so that's the shape of the cabinet, including the doors. So if you wanted to show the doors later, I would do the doors once you've got the design signed off and you're sure you're going to go with that. Then you would come back and bring this edge of the cabinet back a little bit and then add the doors afterwards. But again, this is the shape of the cabinet, including the doors at the moment, and that's fine at this point. And so then over in properties, I'll set the extrusion start to 100. And then we're going to keep it to round numbers. So the kitchen bench, I'm going to make 50 mil thick. And so that means if the top of the kitchen bench is at 900, then the bottom of the kitchen bench will be 850. And so that's the height of my cabinet. So going from 100 to 850, again, tick to finish. And then to my 3D view, you can see there is the cabinet now sitting nicely on top of the kickboard there. And so then I'll go back to the 3D view, sorry, to the plan view, and finally do the kitchen bench. And so I've of course been modeling all of the components. If you're using the casework families, if you have rectilinear kitchens, in other words, kitchens with straight lines, you can use those cabinets, but you still should make the bench top the way I'm going to show you using an extrusion. It works a lot better than using those kitchen bench and countertop families because you can make the shape anything you like, and it's also much easier to cut out things like voids for kitchen sinks and other things you need to cut out of your bench. So again, I'm going to go and make another extrusion, and then I'll set the extrusion end to our bench top height, which should always be 900, and then the bottom of this bench will be 850. So that's my extrusion start. And then to make the bench shape, all I need to do is now pick the edge of my cabinet on the 3 sides where it lines up, and then I'm going to put in an offset of 50 and pick the outer edge of my cabinet for the final line, and then trim all of that together. Oops, again, where I picked the line has made it join the wrong way, so I'll undo that and just try again. And there we are. So, okay, so going back to my 3D view. Okay, so that's basically given us the kitchen. Now, having done that, you might then realise that you want an overhang. Let's say you didn't want those doors on the inside to be flush with your kitchen bench. Depends on the design. There are some really nice kitchens where you'll see the doors are perfectly flush with the bench, but then in other cases it can be set back. So I just want to show you how easy it is now to modify this. Having set it up properly, I'm firstly just going to go to wireframe in the plan view so that I can see what's under my bench, and I'll start with the cabinet. So using, you see there, that's the edge of my cabinet that I've just selected. So I'll go back to edit extrusion. Okay, so let's say we want the edge of this to come back 50 mil. So a great option for that is offset. And then I'm going to put in 50 there and then turn copy off. So that way, if I pick this arc, it's going to move at 50 mil parallel to itself, right, instead of copying it, which is what normally happens when you use offset. So that's a really good way of moving lines to one side or another. And so I'll finish that one. And now I need to do the same with the kickboard. So the kickboard is underneath the cabinet. And so again, in wireframe, it's easy to see that there. You can see that I've just selected it, and I'll go to edit extrusion, go to offset, and it's kept the same settings. So I can just pick that arc there to, again, move it 50mm. So clicking tick now to finish it. If we look at this in 3D, you can see then that I've got my kickboard set back on both sides from the cabinet, and then the cabinet is set back on both sides from the bench. And then one last little thing, just to make it look a bit neater, you could then use the join tool and join the kickboard and the cabinet. And then if you really wanted to, you could join the cabinet and the bench, just to take away all those inner lines. Okay, so that's one side done, and because it's symmetrical, it's not difficult now to mirror this to the other side. So I'll just use a window in Plan to select all 3 extrusions there. And then I'll go to Mirror, Draw Axis, and use the midpoint or the quadrant of one of those circles. And then just bring it straight down, so I've got a vertical mirror line. And that will flip it to the other side, and there we are. Okay, now that one looks quite a bit larger than the one in the image, actually. But with that setup, it wouldn't be difficult to then adjust that radius using the method I showed you. So maybe I'll just quickly do that, because that's, I think, going to be an important thing. So, okay, so looking at this, then we can decide, well, yeah, it's maybe, again, a bit too wide. Maybe the one that was drawn here is probably 1 metre less than that. So if we measure across all the way, it's 3200. So maybe I should bring it in 800 all up. So that would take it down to 2400, and that means it would come in 400 on each side if we're reducing it by 800 overall. Okay, so now that I know that, I can select one of these shapes. Maybe I'll start with the bench, actually, because then we can see that. So to make it easier to know what I'm doing, I'll finish the model and then bring the detail lines in. So remember, we've got to come in 400 on each side, which means the radius comes down by 400. So this one will be 600. And then, yeah, it's going to be, yeah, you got to just be careful with this. So 1200. Yeah, I think that'll, is that about right? Yeah, it's closer. Maybe I've gone a bit too far. So, okay, so maybe instead of 400, I'll do 300. So again, we'll select this and reduce it by 300 to 700. And so hopefully you can see how helpful it is having these circles to set out those measurements. Okay, so now with those 2 circles, to help me, I can go back and select the bench top. I'll select the whole thing. It's all one thing to start with, but then again, back to Edit in Place. Then I can select the top, which is the bench, go to Edit Extrusion. And now I could use Offset to move those curves. But I'm going to show you another great way, which is to use Align. So using the Align tool, I can pick the circle there, and then this curve, and then the other circle, and then the other curve. Tick to finish. Now, because I'm going to be repeating this, so I don't want to have to repeat this for the other side, I'm just going to delete the whole other side and I'll mirror that again to get it back. Okay, so looking in the 3D view, I've brought the bench top into my new size, but then the cabinet and the kickboard still need to be done. So back to the plan. So I've selected the cabinet, go to Edit Extrusion. And so this is where it will help to remember the measurements. So using Offset, and I'll put in 300 for the distance. And now I should be able to pick those edges. And because copy's turned off, it is just going to move them 300 across. So now it's just the kickboard. And again, using Offset and coming in 300 both sides. Well, so hopefully you can see how if you set it up in an organized way, it's quite easy to make adjustments. And then again, now I'll select this and use Mirror, Draw Axis, flip it again to the other side, same way as before. And there we are. I think that's pretty close to what's in the image. Okay, so that should be enough, but then maybe we'll just quickly look at assigning materials to this again as well. So just remember, once you finish the model, that when you select it, there's no option to assign materials. And it might become a bit clearer why there isn't an option to assign materials at this level, because there are many extrusions in this object. Okay, and we'd often want those materials to be different. So therefore you need to select edit in place and select each of those pieces, and you can set a material individually to each one. So I've selected one of the kickboards, I'll hold down Control and select the other one. And then over in properties, you can see there's the option to set the material. So I'm not going to make a material. We did that last week. I'm just going to select one that I already have made. I should have a black or a dark material somewhere here. That's pretty standard for kickboards. So plastic, something black, that'll do. Now that's interesting. Okay, because the one on the right was joined, all of those objects have taken on the same material. So watch out for that. So I'm going to go to unjoin now, unjoin geometry, and just pick those two bits at the top. And then I'll have to select those and give them a different material. I'll also better check that that plastic opaque. I must have been playing around with that and set a transparency. Don't know why I would have done that. Yeah, I must have just been playing around. So I'll take the transparency back to 0 so it's not see-through anymore. That's better. Okay, and so then the two upper pieces, because they were joined, they got the same material, but I'm going to go and set them to have a different material now. So there's another plastic material that's basically an off-white, or it's a grey, but I'll make it more of an off-white. And then back to graphics, I'll just use render appearance so that it picks up that colour. And there we are. Okay, so now I can set the other cabinet and the bench to have the same material. Okay, so that's it. Finished model. And it's done. So select it and then you can see that should cover it. And again, if you get that signed off and everyone's happy with it, then at that point, only at that point, would I think about modelling the doors. And just remember, it's very unlikely that you're going to see them in a 3D view. You'll see it from the outside, but you're unlikely to see much of what's on the inside curve. So you may not even need to put the doors in at any point. The purpose of your kitchen modelling is really to show the layout of the primary elements. So as well as having the benches, of course, you'd want to show your stove, your sink and your fridge, and work out how they are planned in that kitchen. So that would be the next thing. Once you've got the benches done, I would straight away put a stove and a sink in. And so if you've forgotten, they're just in the library. You can just go to component and just get a standard kitchen sink from the plumbing fixtures. Okay, so you have these basic, well, they're called kitchen sinks. They're very small, but I think they just qualify. So there's one kitchen sink single. Well, even this one's a bit large for this because of the curve. So maybe you'd have to go for the even smaller one, this kitchen sink kitchen island, which is very small for a kitchen, I've got to say. But if that's all you can fit, then you'd have to use it. And it actually gives me a good chance to show you one of the problems with Revit that they still haven't fixed. I thought they'd fixed it with this release, but they obviously haven't. And so you can see here that I'm not getting the full list of families over on the left when I go to place component. Now, if you look down at the very bottom at the most recently used types, you'll often be able to find them there. And you can see there it is, kitchen, sink, kitchen island is there. But in some cases, it won't even come up in those most recent types at the very bottom. So what you'll need to do, if you know that a family is loaded and it should be in that list, but you can't see it, all you need to do is instead go to edit type. So again, this drop down, I think just because of the pictures, it has a few glitches. Thumbnails basically cause some problems. So instead of that, go to edit type. And then you'll see if you click on the list at the top, you'll always get the full list of all the families. And you just need to remember the name. So again, in this case, it was Sink Kitchen Island. Right, so that's a really helpful tip. You'll find that problem comes up all the time. Okay, so there, I can press space now to flip that sink around. Again, it doesn't need to be in the exact position that it's going to be in the end. Initially, you just want to plan it and try and work out how big it's going to be in relation to what you've designed. And then I'm going to go back to specialty equipment and then domestic. And there you've got some cooktops. Now, again, these are for larger kitchens. So that four burner cooktop, I would say is not going to fit on this bench again because it's curved. It's a bit unusual. So I'm just going to use the 2 burner, which again is too small for most kitchens, but I think it's all we can fit here. And again, because I've loaded it previously, I have to go into the list over here. And again, it's not there because of that glitch. Now, you can see it's come up at the bottom anyway, recently used types, but if you still can't get it, again, remember you can always get all this going to edit type, and then you can see again it's right there. Okay, so again, pressing space, a good little tip there, if you move your cursor onto a curve and then press space, it'll rotate and align with the curve. So maybe I suppose you could put in a 2 burner one here. I don't know how it would really work, but again, that's something you have to think about for the design. But at least now looking at it in 3D, then we can start to see how those components might work. And again, once you've resolved the position and the general planning of the kitchen, then you might start putting in detail like a hole for the sink. So for when you get up to that point, I'll just show you that to finish off. So selecting the bench, go back to edit and place. I'm going to select my bench top, go to edit extrusion, go to the floor plan for that level, and I'm simply going to draw a rectangle in between the edge of the bowl and the edge of the sink mounting plate. So just roughly in between those 2 lines, something like that. Okay, so that's done. If I click tick to finish, now there's a rectangular hole in my bench top. But if we look at it in 3D, you can see that the edge is covered by the sink. And because this is a cabinet underneath, I could have shown you a void, and a void would have been good here actually, but yeah, so I'll do a void as well. Okay, so I'll go back to the plan and then I'll make a void form, void extrusion, and essentially just draw a rectangle the same shape as what I just made. And then I'm going to check the extrusion start and just guess and say that the sink probably is about 500 mil from the floor. Well, it's a bit higher than that, but we want to be cutting away a bit lower. And the top 900, that's fine because that's the bench top. So again, I'll click tick to finish and then back into the 3D view. Now you can see it's cutting away the cabinet as well. There we are. So hopefully that should cover it. Railings, yeah, okay. So yeah, I'll talk to you about the railings in a minute as well. But I might just finish that recording on the kitchen. Hopefully that's going to give you enough for that.